Good morning, and welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep, transformative level. Whether you're joining us live here during Sunday Story Hour in my Facebook group or catching this on your favorite podcast platform on Mondays, you'll be able to find all the details you need in the show notes or the Facebook comments. Human design helps us to differentiate between what is ours and what is conditioning. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest this week is joining us all the way from Sweden, so I guess I should have maybe said good afternoon. But my guest is Bella Krystal, a 4/6 Sacral Generator, right angle cross of the Sphinx. And you might know her from her 64 Doors amazing website or Unlock Your Design that she does with Ashley. But I'm just super excited to have a whole hour to spend with you, Bella. And I know that you're going to have so much wisdom to share. But right now, I would really love if you would just take us back and start by saying hello and telling us right away how human design found you.
Thank you for having me. And it's been, I think, like 11 or 12 years. Human design found me after a really hard time that I had around my Saturn return, where everything fell apart, that kind of story. And I was back in Sweden. I already lived abroad. I lived in the States and I was back in Sweden. I had 8 months where I was actually speaking to God every day, asking him if this is life, I don't think it's worth it. But I never had anything of like thinking that I was going to take a way out, but I was asking, all the time if it was worth it. And then I was able to leave because I think there was something about coming back to the place I came from and feeling like between my 20s and my 30s, everything was a failure. And with everything I had done, I was back where I was born. So I was able to say yes to a work project in Solana Beach in California. And when I got off the plane, that kind of anxiety and confusion about identity and everything was gone. And I functioned normally again. And I'm a pure generator. I have a fixed cross. So usually I'm very consistent. And if I decide I'm going to do something, I'll do it. And that hadn't happened for 8 months. But when I got off that plane, I was myself again, it felt like. And I think like 3 or 4 days later, when I was having breakfast, watching the ocean on the cliffs of Solana Beach, a friend of mine, James Alexander, that you guys may know, he's an analyst in human design. He sent me the chart, the body graph, and he had just signed up with Rosy Aronson for her 8-week program. And she had something at that point where you did her course for 8 weeks. There was one session that was included, and then she was also creating her Wisdom Keeper cards at the time. And I just had this sacral yes that I didn't know what it was at the moment. So I drove up the whole entire coast from Southern California to San Francisco, where she was living at the time. And I had my first session in her house on her sofa. And that's where it started. And she became my coach. So for 4.5 years, I had weekly or bi-weekly sessions with her where I just like deepening. And she's that natural bridge also between Gene Keys and human design. So that's why I got into both. And for those of you that know me a little bit, you know that I believe that human design is like, that's the foundation, the base, and the body graph and the matrix. And we need that in order to go deeper into the gates and, add astrology, add Gene Keys, and whatever we want to add, we can add. But really, for me, the mechanics of it, the mechanics of the Maya, is really what we get through human design. So for me, I'm really grateful that I found that at the same time, first or at the same time, at least.
Wow, I didn't know that about you and your connection with Rosy. For those who don't know who Rosy Aronson is, she wrote this beautiful deck of cards, which I have, and maybe at some point when you're talking, I'll bring them over for those that are watching on video. They're really powerful, and it's called the Wisdom Keepers, and it started with these beautiful drawings that she did. And I did get to hear her speak once at the first Human Design conference I went to, which I often talk about how that was a life-changing experience, and she was a part of that, even though she was remote, because that was like at the end of COVID and stuff. So, okay, so this, like, you got in good then, like that was deep right away. Like how long from when you, so okay. I think I lost something in there. I'm so like caught up in the Rosy thing that I think I lost. How did you actually find the human design chart? Like someone introduced it to you or you stumbled on it?
So I was having breakfast and I was, I guess, reborn somehow from having been in that dark place. It was my friend James Alexander
Oh
who
yeah, that's
sent
right.
an
Okay.
email. And
Yeah.
I was like, watching it on my screen, and I was like, there's something in here for me. So it was like that same day, I think, that I signed up. I remember I was in the gym and I was calling Rosie on the gym, and I was,
Yeah.
telling her,
Okay.
do you think I can do it live? And she's like, yeah. Okay. I'm like, California can't be that big. Like,
Right? It's a little bigger than Sweden. Like California is bigger than Sweden, right? Like I'm trying to I don't mean my husband will tell
I
you
don't know,
countries, not
because
my
I mean,
thing.
I know that Sweden, if you take Sweden and fold it this way, you get all the way to Italy. If you would like take it from the north and fold it on the map. So it's a really,
Oh.
really long country, but I don't know exactly how much
California is
longer or shorter it is.
long. Yeah, that's interesting. Some geography person would tell us. My husband would roll his eyes and be like, "How do you not know that?" Right? Because he's the geography guy. He's a 5-1. He seems to investigate all that stuff. But okay, so you spent how much time working with Rosie? Would you say?
It was 4.5 years. And actually, the only reason why it stopped, which I think, sometimes is just those cycles that are supposed to end. She was moving from California to Santa Fe, I think it is. So then she was focusing more on her art projects and other things. So it was that natural ending. And I think that was about the time where suddenly there were people that started to ask me about human design, and especially in other languages, because already in English, people could find it, but in other languages with less. So I started readings, and it kind of became that, from just being my own not investigation, I wouldn't say, because I don't I have one first line in my Pluto on the design side, but exploration, embodied exploration. And that's where it was embodied enough for me to start to be able to share it. And it could, be felt in my aura that there was something aligned that, was kind of inspiring, I guess, for other people.
So you were in this place of, really seeking something, but not knowing what it was. What was it that you think you initially felt or saw or in the body graph or in the knowledge that you got initially that had this visceral reaction where you're willing to drive all the way up the state of California to go learn more about it?
I think it was a little bit from a shadow as well, or from a fear, because I had, so this is the picture. I had like spent 8 months, like basically with the demons is what I felt, asking God every day, why am I, not why am I here, but if this is life, it's not worth it. I felt like a scared animal, cornered, and I would wake up every morning feeling like I had a knife against my throat. That was how bad it was. I never had any mental issues, any physical issues. My hormonal system, my thyroid, my adrenals, everything was like burnt out. I really didn't want to live like that. And then suddenly I was able to intuitively feel that I had to get out of that environment of my country. I go to Solana Beach, or I step off the plane in San Diego, and I don't feel anything. I wake up the morning for 3 mornings and I feel like my old self. So part of me, I guess, was extremely afraid that I would just fall back into that state again. And then I saw this that seemed to make so much sense, because I think a big part of why I got to that point was that I had driven myself. I have the 38-28, which is the channel struggle. I had driven myself against who I am for so long. So the system eventually said, I'm not with you anymore. And it broke down. So when I saw this system and it told me, you're not a 5-1, you're not super tough, you don't have a defined ego, you're not here to just be, tougher than everybody else. It's okay that you don't know how to cut from relationships. You're actually quite sweet and quite idealistic and quite visionary, and you really care about connection and trust and belonging. So all these things about the 4-6, about who I am with my undefined centers, made so much sense, so that I felt that it was a permission slip to start to be me from the inside, instead of looking everywhere. What school should you go to? Which MBA is the best one? How many languages can you learn? How how do you, make that life in New York with the diplomat that I was engaged to at the time? Like all these outer things that seemed to be the adventure that I wanted for my life, yet it wasn't aligned. Even if it seemed to kind of make sense, it wasn't completely aligned. So for me, when I found it, it was almost like a hope that I would be able to align more instead of falling back into something that was extremely scary and that I definitely felt I had no control over. And I didn't even know how I got myself there.
Wow. So was Rosy your very first reading, or had somebody else told you stuff? So you got in your car and drove to her house, or you had a reading with her on the phone first?
No, I just spoke to her on the phone, and I think she explained to me what the program was and like a little bit what human design was and how she looked at it with the wisdom keepers. So it was noisy in the background, and and then I realized, because I think some people think that a reading is enough, whether it's astrology or human design or any other system, and I felt the opposite. I felt that first time with her was an introduction, and then that was when I started to just go deep, and I knew that I needed support. And sometimes I think we believe that when we know our design, that's equal as living our design. But now I'm still learning to live my design, and I still find myself in some of those patterns that and like you said before we started recording, sometimes it's even the defined centers that feel a bit more kind of stubborn in doing something that's not necessarily good for us, because we have energy there and we are used to doing it a certain way. So for me, I'm still deconditioning. I believe that is happening all the time. And if it's 7 years, it's actually spirals of 7 years. So we have resets, then we continue to go.
Yes. Yes. I just had my 8th year from, actually last Monday, I was 8 years ago that I saw my body graph the first time. And I definitely say it's, same devil, new level, right? You come back around and you're looking at some of the same things. And then, like I remember probably only a couple, maybe, no, I probably did not print my gene keys for years because I didn't get in. I have a different story than a lot of people, although I know everybody's story is different. And many people had a similar thing where it spoke to me when I'm a projector, emotional authority, all those things really spoke to me. The idea of waiting for recognition, that whole not knowing when enough is enough, totally spoke to me. But then I started to go deep dive and learn all this stuff, right? Got in my open head about it. And was like, this is some crazy cult stuff. Here I was this like, I didn't find it until I was already off the roof. This was 8 years ago. I mean, I was already off the roof, technically, supposedly. I was past Chiron. And I just said, crystals of consciousness in the earth. And what's this rave stuff in 2020? This is some crazy whack stuff. And I just like put it away. But my soul, my subconscious kept reminding me, well, of course that didn't work. You made a spontaneous decision. You didn't wait till you had, like, it kept going on. So years later, after enough things where I still consider that my experiment, because I kept thinking about it. I couldn't not think about it, but it was probably the purest part of my experiment, because it really was just reflecting on life and experimenting with what wasn't working. But then I wound up, when I really got deep in 2019, that's when I saw my gene keys activation sequence. And I can tell you, like, I would go months without looking at it, and I'd read it again and I would be like, oh, now I understand what that means. Like you read the same exact thing, just at a different point in your journey. And all of a sudden it just makes sense. And that's why when people try to learn too much too soon, it's pointless, because you're not ready for the knowledge, right? It's a wisdom. And that's why I love that you did that all with Rosy, because I think she probably conveyed that to you very deeply. So anyway, I hijacked your story a little bit. So now you spent 4.5 years living up there in San Diego, or no, you just kept continuing to work with her remotely?
I think Rose is the person that I have called from the most various places on this earth. Like I've been on the phone, we almost always did on the phone because I was traveling so much and in strange places like Brazil and India. So I would like try to get some privacy or at least be outside. And, she has a very, we could say, psychological approach because she's also a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was just thinking about it as you were speaking. I think that with her, I got a lot of counseling around what I believe now from an astrological perspective is my Pluto and my Saturn, which is some of those gates that are heavy. So I have the 57 and the 32, which is, the fear of failure and the fear of tomorrow. It's like all these splenic. And I think that that's a lot what, again, I mentioned fear before. That's what didn't allow me to really live fully. So with her, I feel like I got a lot of counseling around all these patterns where the perfectionism, where I thought I needed to do all things and, being the best student in my school or at least have A+. And I got to speak about it until I could hear myself more, I guess. And then I was ready to somehow go out of the, not necessarily victim story, but, sometimes you have to get so tired of yourself so that you just kind of shake it off and you don't care anymore. And it's almost like that happened. She was an amazing support. It was actually usually not about human design even, because what would happen is that I would start speaking and there would be so much to speak about. So I would speak for 45 minutes. And then she's so beautiful in her way of like listening. She also has the 57-34. So she will listen with her whole being, with her whole aura. And then she will relate to you really simply in a few sentences what you said. And you will feel so listened to. So you just want to cry and feel like it's worth it to live. And then she might give you just one or two things. But I also recognize that was me taking up that time. And I think that was where I was at the time. Probably today I would have used it differently, but also I remember sometimes when I was a little bit more deconditioned, I would tell Rosy, can we just sit and look at my charts? Can I just ask you about the channels and the gates? And she would tell me, that's not how I work. There is like nothing in me, because she's a Sacral Generator too. There's nothing in me that will respond to that kind of thing. I'm responding from the wholeness of your being. The last thing I want to speak to you about is your 2838. So then I realized that actually, even if I had been ready before, that wouldn't have worked either, because that's not how she works. So for me, it was to have this sounding board as I was exploring a completely new way of living, where I went through different stages of, I think, finding things and ways to live that were more accurate to me. And then as a 4-6, and also having my Saturn and my Pluto in Libra, so much of my life is about relationships, and so much of my sorrow and grief and also joy and hope is from relationships. So I think Rosy knows everything about me and relationships. And that was really where it started to, because I couldn't cut, but I couldn't continue. Like there was so much around that fourth line that for me is also the fourth line, the fourth chakra, the heart. Can you breathe? Can you not breathe? That was very like charged for me. And when I allowed more space there and had more understanding, I believe I could start living in a way that was more constructive.
So I have about 42 million ways I want to go right now with this question. But the one thing, so this might feel disjointed, but it's just the thing that's loudest in my open head and ajna right now. Well, I've open ajna, undefined head, is that, so you're in the middle of your Saturn return when all this happened. And your Saturn gate is the most intuitive gate in the chart. And that's also that. So gate 57.2 is your conscious Saturn, your personality Saturn. But I also noticed that 57 is your core wound. It's your unconscious Mars. And you have this, and that is also mine. 57.4 is my core wound as well.
Richard Rudd and Rosy Aronson have 57.1 in their core wound, both of them.
No, I did not know that. So I feel like, so one of the other things that, we both mentioned before this, or that you mentioned, and I've definitely been aware of, is that my conscious sun is gate 14 and your conscious sun is gate 2, which is the channel of the beat. And So that's a really powerful connection. Now, for me, my conscious sun is on an undefined sacral. So I feel that need for that energy so strongly, right? I have my undefined, my design sun is also on my undefined sacral. I have gate 59, and I have gate 59 3 times on my undefined sacral. So, I don't know how I went there from the wound, but I just know there's a strong connection here. And when I just saw this about the core wound, I feel like that's something that maybe we can talk a little bit about what that was like for you, because this Saturn, you're in the midst of that Saturn return with this gate 57 energy, adding in the 32. And then, I don't know, I just feel like I just want to ask you to just speak to that energy, because I'm sure you have thoughts right now. So,
Yeah, I know that Richard Rudd speaks about the 57, which is his own core wound, or Design Mars, as the core wound of humanity. And I remember, I think it was when COVID started, I did something, I spoke about it because I could feel the frequency when they started the lockdowns. And in Florida, there were police cars, only for a weekend, there were police cars in my neighborhood, and you could see the red light and the blue light. And they kind of just wanted to make sure, I guess, that people weren't outside, but you didn't know at that time what it was. So I could feel the fear frequency. And it's actually something quite quiet. Like it's in the air, it's in the intuition of it, and it kind of is penetrating you, which is the fear of tomorrow. And like humanity, we have had to change so many times, from being hunters to being gatherers, to like we've had to change so many times and adapt. But there's also often a fear in that change. And I think that that's what the 57 is feeling. And it kind of feels it coming in the wind. And I believe that has a lot to do with anxiety, but even also the depression, but probably more a kind of anxiety, which today is also with everything that we are coping with. I think such a high degree or high percentage of humanity, we have some form of anxiety, and a lot of it we might try to medicate, or like whether the symptom is that you don't sleep, or the symptom is that you feel nervous, and somehow it's just we are responding to what's around us. And for me, my response, connecting the 57 to the 32, had always been to try to be as perfect as possible, because I thought that I could kind of conquer the 57 and I didn't need to have any fear of tomorrow if I was just perfect. And what does perfect mean? Well, it means that you have a good job, that you had the best grades, that you go to the best schools, that you speak all the languages, that you have several passports, like kind of actually trying to make a life so that you don't have to be scared of tomorrow, marrying the right person, like these kinds of things. And at the same time, that is an imprinting that's there for a reason. We cannot eradicate or erase the gates. They are part of the human experience. And the whole Rave Mandala has part of that code that we are, the program that we're in. So for me, that's how, I tried again, and this is again, my Pluto and my Saturn activations. And so it's like there's a lot of weight there. And my strategy for living those fear gates hadn't worked. And I think that for many of us, the way that we are responding to anxiety, to depression, to the things that don't feel good are not necessarily healthy ways. Could be distractions, could be like, there's so many ways that we're responding. And I think that is a question that's important. How do I respond when I have a fear, anxiety in my field, in my body? And what would be maybe a more healthy way to respond? And also, can that show that there is something in my environment that's not good for me? And that there you go back to your open sacral, to your open head or undefined head and ajna, to see, we also need to see, are we in the right place in these kinds of questions? Because I think it's our responsibility to find, again, more constructive ways of dealing with ourselves in our lives. And we have sometimes more ways and possibilities than what we think. The easy thing is the pill, right? Whether you have a headache, but there might be a reason for the headache. The same thing with anxiety and these states that are a little bit more maybe complex and scary.
Yeah. So you said about being in the right place. And then that made me think about how you said when you got to San Diego, you felt different.
Yeah.
And do you think or did you feel like it really was the place, or was it the sense of, okay, sometimes we make a story up about the place we were or the place we're at. So do you think it was your body felt different, or did you feel like it was your mind had a different story about where you were?
I think it was a combination. I think my failure story connected to Saturn in the 32. It was that after 20 years being out in the world, from like after high school and 10 years, I had done all the things I thought were right, but I had ended up in an Airbnb in Stockholm where I kind of didn't know a lot of people anymore. And I felt like a scared animal, caged animal. So that didn't feel good. So then I didn't want to be there. And so on one side, it was my judgment of where I had ended up, thinking, at the Saturn return, you kind of think that like now you're old and life is over in some kind of sense, like, or you should have it well figured out, and you don't. Right. And then the other thing is that I'm half Spanish. So I feel that for me, always when I was in Sweden, I was missing that part of me. And coming back to Sweden, I guess I was missing it even more. And then when you go to California or to Florida, like those are the states in the United States where there is a lot of that Latin culture, and also the sun. In Malaga, where my dad is from, there is 320 days of sun every year. So for me to not be in that climate, of course, it wasn't helpful. To be completely isolated with a knife against my throat, somehow it was so easy to isolate in Sweden. And then when I came to the States, I went right into a project. There was a purpose. Even if it wasn't a life purpose, at least it felt like I was valuable in some sense. And I guess that I had kind of taken myself out of the system and isolated myself. And then it was just all these questions and the Saturn return. And so the turmoil was much louder when I was isolated. And then I had a purpose, and I could start to tread. And then with the human design coming in and accepting that maybe I'm not supposed to be like my mind thinks that I should be, because that's what leadership is. And so this is interesting. At the time, I didn't know I had the 31/7 channel, right? I didn't know, but it was like I was programmed to know that I was supposed to have some kind of leadership. Also the 6th line in my profile, the 6th line with the 31 and the 7. So it just felt even more like a failure. However, the leadership that I was, going to step into maybe at 50, I'm still in the discerning phase. So there was this felt sense of something wanting to emerge, but I thought it was supposed to already be ready. And human design just showed me to kind of relax. And that's also what I did for so long. And you're a projector. I worked with John Martin, Human Design Hawaii, for my certification. And he would sometimes just say, stop. Like you can hear how fast I speak, right? So sometimes he would just be stop. Because he could, he was just filtering the generators, and he could say, you're off, you're on, and he was the one saying, don't pretend to be a fuzzy projector with, your G center with your incarnation cross, and you're just telling humanity from your 4, 6, 31, 7 where they are supposed to go. Like, first and foremost, you're a selfish animal. You're here to live from your 34, 57. That is your inner authority. That is your aura type. And, that's why in the 64 doors, we're calling the 34 the Black Panther, because that is that kind of animal that's completely in their body. There is no competition in the jungle or wherever the panther lives. And to start to live from that sacral knowing and from that individuality, actually. And then when you're completely anchored in your inner authority and you are embodying your aura type, then there's so much cool things that can come out of you from the split, or from even with the open centers or your variables. But it really takes, and this is what I'm missing in the Gene Keys, it takes coming back to your inner authority. It comes back to knowing your aura type, because everything has to do with embodiment. Like, there's nothing that can be nice about this experience if we're not inside of the vessel.
Yeah. So, okay. So I didn't know you worked with John Martin too. So that's really cool. So the 3457, for those who are trying to keep up and, without looking at the chart, and, some of our listeners or viewers are newer in the experiment, whatever channel defines our authority is what you're talking about, is really like a key to who you are. So for you, being a pure sacral generator, that 3457 is what gives you sacral definition. And that connects through this powerful energy of the what you call the Black Panther, the Power Now 34 to the 57, which is the one we were talking about before, about the fear of tomorrow and this highly intuitive gate. So knowing that, but yet you were talking about how all your incarnation cross gates are on the G center. And I was already thinking about how the fact that you have all these powerful energies on your G center, your identity center, and then that is connected through the one of your other incarnation cross gates, one of the 7 connects to the 31, and that connects to your throat. So it probably, I was actually wondering if that causes you to soundboard a lot and to talk in a lot of ways that's similar to a self-projected projector, right? So that's funny now to see that John Martin was kind of telling you stop doing that or whatever. But don't you think that that's still part of who you are, is you do process things that way in a certain extent, especially when because you have this split between your throat and your sacral. So he's not saying that you shouldn't soundboard. He's just saying that's not your authority, right? Is that what?
I mean, he was very much going back to design and the basics of design. And I remember when he was a 6'2" splenic projector, I remember when there were volcanoes like all over Hawaii, and he didn't have that splenic response to move. So he was the only person who wasn't evacuated. So he was very much like fatalistically, or I don't know what the word would be, but he was very much living completely by design and strategy and authority being big. So he actually gave me the whole library of everything that you could watch to learn things. But when we met in all these times when we had one-on-ones, he would just take me back to my sacral center. And he would kind of be angry with me if I would have said something that what you said now, he would have like cut my head in some kind of way and made me feel really like I was really wrong, which was my biggest fear. So, it was kind of exposure therapy as well with him. So that's John. On the other hand, there's sometimes where I can like get teary-eyed because when I read about self-projected projectors, I feel so identified. And that is not something I decide. Like that's like an emotion coming up because I know that when I hear myself saying it, sometimes I can just feel the truth and the sweetness of it because like it comes through me that way. And I also love I love and understand self-projected projectors. So yeah, my answer would be that definitely that part is there. And your reasoning, I believe, is a reasoning that's very valid.
So I have a similar aspect in my design with my channel 1/8 being my only conscious channel. And then I'm a triple split, right? So even though my authority is emotional authority and I do have a defined spleen and those two don't talk to each other either, because for me, I find that, okay, my emotional wave is not giving me clarity. And if it, and I'm not connecting my throat to it. And then I have these splenic, I definitely have in the recent years understood when my spleen is saying, no, don't do that. But it's not always clear and connected. And so I have found that when I am processing something, soundboarding, it's almost like something drops in, like I feel like sometimes when I'm soundboarding, I'm almost channeling, right? And then I can feel it in my body in a way where I'll be saying something and all of a sudden it's like my spleen lights up and says, or my identity center is just like drawing things to, like, I'm just like, yes, you are speaking truth. This is right. This is everything in my body is like, yes. And so you with this completely open emotional solar plexus, right? No, not only do you have no hanging gates, you have nothing, from the throat doesn't point there, nothing from the will points there, nothing from the sacral points there. You have 2 root gates, the 39 and the 41 that would create electromagnetics. So like my husband has a completely open spleen. I mean, not spleen, completely open solar plexus. And I often feel like he has an on-off switch. Like he either has no emotions or he is the most emotional, deep, empathetic, caring person that I've ever met. Otherwise, other times I'm like, damn, you're cold. Like, and I wonder if people say that about you, like you're either super feeling, and do you feel that when you're talking like that, when you're processing, where you kind of that stuff comes through? I don't know if that was a clear question. It was kind of a big bleh.
No, I like it. So I'm an only child, and both my parents were emotional. So I think I was swimming in that emotional field for my whole childhood without knowing it. And there's a part of that that's very intense and not always easy. So for me, I think that when I was able to kind of come to this plate, which I'm not supposed to, but hopefully, the whole of all the defined centers were working together, then I could feel filled up of myself, because you're always filled up with that completely open ego center, completely open emotional center, and everything coming in terms of expectations, in terms of the emotions. You always feel filled up by something around you. And when I can connect to my inner authority and to my throat and my G, that's when I could feel intact in myself. So that's definitely been a way for me to filter and to come back to what's truly something that I can trust. And I think too, I don't believe ever that I'm cold or harsh, but because I have a lot of Scorpio, I have the Daredevil gate, the 28. I realize, and people sometimes tell me that sometimes they think I'm very direct, I'm kind of harsh, and I will go dark. But for me, like, I do that because I love so much, right? It's a little bit like that Cancer gate that you and I, the 39 that we have in our North Node. It's the crab. It has like a shell, but it has a shell because it needs to be able to stay there for love, for liberation, from where the floodgates open. So for me, I would absolutely not say that I don't feel. Or that I'm harsh or hard. But I think that what I do know is that I can be disinterested. I can have no emotion because I can be bored. I have some of, my Venus, my IQ is in Aries. I want things to be fast. I speak fast. I want leadership. And if it's just going to be boring and the same thing forever, I can be very disinterested. So I think that is something you could see on my face. I can't fake it. If I'm bored or disinterested, you're going to see it. So maybe that is a kind of emotionlessness of saying, this is boring, I am not up for it. And then I can be extremely intense and engaged and, going deep and merging and dying and coming back, which is, of course, possibly amplifying something, but also I believe can be co-creating something through that emotional center.
Okay. So I'm going to switch gears now. That's just how that's just how my mind works. So how did you wind up creating this 64 doors and unlock your design tell me how you met Ashley.
We were put together by Melinda Butterfield. She was in Ashley's field because Ashley had a little group. Ashley started to do just readings for no money at all, almost, because she was in a mentorship program and they were told to make a certain amount of money every day. So she just started to do a lot of reading. She's a 5/1, so she went deep investigating and just doing all these readings. So she had something on Facebook. She was pregnant with her 4th child, and Melinda was going to help her. Actually, at the time, she also, for some reason, had found both human design and Jinkies at the same time. And this is long ago, remember? So, so then Melinda, she was like, oh, but these 2 girls are doing the same thing, but they're not doing it together. So I should put them together. So she put us together. We started to do the Inner Circle membership, which is now like 6 years or something that we are doing it. And then the following year, I think we said we were already walking the wheel, which is like we are following the sun through the 64 gates. So we were already doing that. It was so interesting because every time the sun switches, right now the sun is in 40. So that's the gate of saying no. So whatever the theme is for where the sun is, we can usually feel it. It comes up in the collective. It comes up in our lives. So what we started to do was to say, maybe we could create something. So it's like an archetype or a door. And every time the sun comes in, we just like, we highlight that and we show people that somehow. So we started to create the library of the 64 doors. I started to write the descriptions and it was so fast. So at the end of the day,
nobody resource.
Nobody could keep up with us. Like, we created that website in 5.7 days, because, if there's 65 gates in a year, the sun is going to stay 5.7 days in each gate. So we had to create a new landing page with all these resources every 5.7 days. So it was definitely a lot of just, the gate of enthusiasm, which is my Mercury. Ashley has it on her design side. We kind of just met in that enthusiasm. And then I'm an earth sign, I'm Taurus in the gate 2, and she's a Virgo. We have a lot of work ethic. So if we were enthusiastic, we started, we were going to finish it. So, and then we didn't, and then we haven't really perfected it, because both her and me with that 16, then there's something new to identify with. So we have just continued to do other things. And right now, Ashley has become nomadic this year with her family. So she's enthusiastic about that. And for the first year, we have less things planned, because it was just like being bigger and bigger and bigger. And now I feel like there's some space to reevaluate and to see, and maybe go back to the 64 doors, maybe it can become a book, like all these things, like kind of revisit, which is not a bad idea.
Yeah, I love the way you have, if anybody hasn't been to, it's just the number 64 doors.com, right? Is that what? Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah.
THE 64doors.com.
The 64doors.com. Yes. Okay. So it's in my history, so it always comes up. But I love that it shows you all the little things too, like, what the animal totem is for each one. And just like, there's so much little stuff in there that I really think is fun. And so it's a great resource for people. And so I really thank you for doing that. I also really love the way you guys teach together. And I want to go back to something you said in the beginning, when you said something about the value of getting multiple readings. And that's something that's really, I've been reflecting on a lot lately, is I'm amazed at how many people are deep in their human design experiment and have never actually even had one real reading. Mm-hmm. And even a first line that really is going to study and do all these things. Do you think that everyone should have a reading, or is that just something we think because we do readings and we want people to have like, I think sometimes people act like, oh, well, yeah, you want people to have readings because you get paid for them. Can you speak a little bit about why you think people should have multiple readings?
I think it's a culture in the human design community that there is so much content out there that you actually can get even for free. A lot of it is out there. And then you think that if you can get all that for free, then you're going to learn, and then you don't really need a reading. And I know that I would never have had probably anybody tell me what John Martin told me about, my mechanics and things that felt harsh at the time, but I can see now that they were true. So to have another human being that knows a lot about the system sounding board to you what's there, it's extremely valuable. I actually wrote on my Facebook yesterday, is there somebody who wants to do an exchange with me? Because there's always something new and fresh. I see you have the gate 1 in your design moon. I have gate 1 in the same line 4 in my personality earth. So that is the connection in the 4th line, and it's the freshness and the creativity in the first gate. So for me, it's really, really cool to connect with others and see what's new and fresh. How do you look at this? How would you see this? And even to be able to kind of, for you and me to look, the 13, the 57, like so many gates, the electromagnetics. So I definitely believe that there is always something new when you have an aura of 2 people coming together, whether one is like the student and one is the reader, it doesn't matter. It's 2 auras interacting, and there's something unique and valuable in that. And also, the other thing is, if people had 1 reading, 2 readings, maybe 3 years ago, there's often actually that either I get an email, or somebody come on a free call that we do on Tuesdays, and they say, I just re-listened to that recording 3 years later, 4 years later, like everything. I didn't remember at all that you had told me that. And I listened, and I just like, so many, many times we aren't really even ready to receive everything at the time. So I think that there's definitely value in having a reading, but also having a sounding board and also going back. And that also gives us that feeling of like, we have grown, we have embodied more. There were things that were said that actually we were able to, even we were able to be more ourselves. So some of the things that are so clear in our charts with our themes, with our channels, we're suddenly able to like really live them. So for me, it's continuous. I actually don't call myself an expert. I don't like if I'm, somebody introduces me as an expert. I'm really learning and still and every day. And like we say, layers are still coming off.
Yeah, I remember maybe a year ago, it might have been, I don't know, time is just so, I don't know how long ago it was, but you and Ashley were doing something about Jupiter, and you allowed people to submit their charts, and you did this free call, and you pulled up charts, and it must have been more than a year ago, because I was going through this, showing my age. I was going through my 5th Jupiter return at the time. And so I said, "Oh, do mine." And you guys you didn't know me at all. And you pulled up my chart, and I listened to the two of you talking about my chart. And you were like, "Oh, wow, look at her chart. Wow, I bet she doesn't even feel like a projector." And you started saying all these things that were so validating. They were so good to hear you guys say the way that my energy worked so differently than, because, when you're reading stuff and you're reading about there was so much in my own self-study that was disempowering. Mm-hmm. Because you start reading about the way things work, and without someone to help you see it in the context of your greater chart, you start seeing it as a rule that you now have to follow, or you're not in alignment. So it's some sort of sign that you're broken, and you can get caught up in all of this stuff. But the more that I have gotten into understanding that nothing exists in isolation, right? That all of it is a totality. So when, especially when you get somebody who starts putting their rock quotes out on the internet in order to tell you why you must have, when people start telling me I need a formal invitation to go to the bathroom, basically, I mean, that's the way some people interpret this stuff. And it's just so disempowering. And I am somebody who is here to speak from the heart of who I am. I have that 1/8. It's my only conscious channel. I'm going to talk about what lights me up, what I'm excited about. And I don't really care. My key is not to not do it. It's just to not need you to recognize me, right? It's like, I don't need you to tell me who I am. I know who I am. I'm not going to waste my energy trying to convince you who I am. That's where the recognition, the invitation, right? And so having that little bit that you guys talked about with my Jupiter too, was really, and that wasn't even about so much my Jupiter, but it was just about the power in that time for me, right? Because I have my Jupiter gates are 51 and 21. So that's starting things and resources, right? So and this has been a really, really powerful time for me since that started. So anyway, but I thank you for that. And it was really cool to listen to you two talk about my energy together. So
yeah, I think that's what her and I have brought to the field. We are not boring. Like when we have the 16, so we are super enthusiastic of what we do. And then we also have 6217, which is the channel of an organizational being. So even if there are tangents, even if it's fast, even if it's enthusiastic, there's also some kind of order in what we do. You will get a workbook, you will get a graphic that shows you. So I think that is the combination. It's not dry. What we do is not dry. And for me, my part is the embodiment and the life force, and even, to the intimacy and sexuality and, that kind of thing. And for Ashley, it's a lot of the play and the creativity. So that is something that we are bringing to the field. And that's, I think that's the cool thing. When we start to embrace our own uniqueness, we can share it, and our mastery in some way, we can share it with the world.
Yeah. That's cool. The other thing is there are not a ton of people who are really collaborating in the human design field, at least not to the extent where it's a partnership like that. And I actually think that that's a disservice to humanity that, that everybody thinks that, I don't know, I don't want to put words into people's decisions as to why they're working independently. I mean, for me, I just haven't had the right invitation at this point to do something, but I love the idea of collaborating. In fact, one of my favorite things is to connect people, right? I love to say, oh, you should talk to this person, or, oh, this is the right thing. I loved, just like I just like referring people to things. I used to do a lot of recruiting back in my days in the retail fashion. I love to go into stores and, find the right person to work in my store from somewhere else or whatever. I like finding the right things. So, but human design tends to be a lot of people just doing their own thing. And then I'm seeing a lot of people burning out because, especially projectors who have this great guidance to give, and it's exhausting of either physical energy or resources to try to create the infrastructure to really get the stuff out there to people in the way that is going to do its best good. So I'm wondering what it's been like for you to build this collaboration. You were kind of early doing it too.
Yeah, no, I hear what you say. And also going back to the fact that there's so much out there that you can get for free, it's actually not that easy to build this as a business. And I would probably not have chosen to do that. I mean, my background is in entrepreneurship, startups, and then business school, and that kind of thing. So I have a logical understanding of how to build a business. And I would not have chosen, like scanning the field, I would not have chosen to do this. We really did this. The whole website that we're speaking about before, the 64 Doors, was free. I think we started with $11 a month for the Inner Circle membership. This was not a business. However, with the consistency of the two pure generators, and then the earth signs with Virgo and Taurus, and that channel I was speaking about, the organization, we were able to continue to create. And also it was fun. Like it was that regeneration. So in terms of the monetary, it was never about that. And at the time, because I had life where I had worked before, I didn't really need to make any money. And Ashley didn't need, for her, it was more also just a hobby. So we didn't build it from that place. And I think it can be extremely stressful and actually not allow you to be in your true inner authority and in your aura in a way that is healthy for you. Because if you have to push and make a certain amount of money, then probably you're not working with your design, you're working against it. Because the whole thing that John Martin used to say is like, we are like in this bubble floating around in space. And you're just, when you are in your true inner authority, you're not bumping in your own bubble and into others. You're actually in flow. And that requires that you're aligned. And I think that as soon as you're starting to push and force and need things to happen, you're actually usually out of alignment. And then we have the burnouts and all these things that are just showing us that we're not in our signature. It's the not self symptoms that start to happen. So I agree. And I feel that it isn't really, possibly it isn't also a conducive field. Like it's not like when I'm in the human design community that I feel a lot of that connection, a lot of that trust, a lot of those fourth line things. It's actually more of a projection. Oh, you are the girl in the bikinis, or like these kind of weird projections. It doesn't matter. Does it matter, or does it So I haven't, more and more, I have just felt that it's more safe for me to create my own universe. I feel, and I would hope that maybe even this conversation we're having right now, inspiring something that is more open, more like open-hearted, a little bit more tolerant as well. I saw this morning, we had Mercury and the moon in gate 4, which, it can be kind of mental and rigid somehow, but it's a Leo gate. So let everybody
Saturn in 63, right? Isn't Saturn in 63? Something's in 63. I think it's Saturn. We have that whole
Exactly.
panel right now. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because I really, I often find myself in response to things people say or whatever, like I just don't even read those things and I will tell people I don't live in that world anymore. And then people think that, well, la-di-da, that's really like, um, they try to make that be me being, idealistic or whatever, but I just don't choose to give my energy to a lot of those things out there. But I will say, I back to what we were saying about the human design and a business. I notice in my business that when I feel success as a projector, it's very seldom about a business dollar amount or something like that. It's usually about something fun. And I've noticed that when what I'm creating, whether it's an offer or a post or whatever business thing I'm creating, when that is fun to me to do, I get traction. I have clients, I have people who want to do it. But if I'm doing it strategically, thinking, ooh, I can market this and this will bring in money and da da da, it falls completely flat. And I think part of that is the second line too. Like if like the second line is the universe is going to cause me to hermit until I'm like really doing what's naturally fun for me. And then it's going to draw people, right? And so realizing that has been very important. But there's still so many people in the human design industry that keep trying to tell us how to market our businesses and run our businesses in ways that still feels very, but we live in a capitalist culture, but I don't know. I don't really can I say I don't live there anymore? I still do have to pay for my eggs when I go to the store. So far, I haven't had anyone bringing them to my house, but my husband, he goes and gets them. I guess my husband can live in that world and I don't have to. I don't know. Um, yeah. So, oh my gosh. So I could talk to you all day. And this has been really exciting. And I know you're doing stuff with your membership, but if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
So either Unlock Your Design, the website, or Facebook. I really try to look even at the requests because that's where a lot of the community stuff is. So Bella Krystal on Facebook as well.
Okay. So and Unlock Your Design is separate. Then you have the 64 Doors as a separate site. So you have two websites.
No, it's connected. So when you go on Unlock Your Design, there's going to be a tab, or on the top menu is going to say the 64 doors. So you can get there from there. But you can also just, when you type in the 64 doors, you can get directly there. So it's the same website, but it's just two URLs.
Okay. And so are you permanently living in Sweden again, or are you just back for a visit?
Yeah, no, I'm only back for a visit, or I have a place here still because I feel that with 2027, we don't know what's going to happen. And I just feel, as also somebody as an earth sign, for me, it is important to have those places. I kind of prefer to have a foundational or like a grounding feeling than to have money in the bank. So for me,
oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, go.
Where do you live in the States when you're here?
In Miami.
Oh, in Miami. Okay, great. Awesome. So every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe of not only your own story, but the story you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story, I'd love to help guide you through the process of fully embodying who you came here to be. I invite you to check out my website at kathybashanko.com, where you can run your free chart, purchase personalized reports, and find all the ways to connect with me directly. And don't forget to follow Real Human Design Stories on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. And please like and share episodes. Take a minute, give me a 5-star review. That helps so much. I'd like to just take a minute and really thank you, Bella. I very much enjoyed our conversation and look forward to hopefully continuing it in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Peace out, everybody.